You ever feel like you're just sort of helplessly being pulled along into the same patterns of thinking, feeling, and reacting, and you're not really the one behind the wheel? If that's the case, you're definitely not alone here, and you might be experiencing something referred to as a trauma loop. So in this video, we're going to go through and break down what one of these trauma loops looks like, and then using brain retraining, see how we can start to shift these vicious cycles into more virtuous circles that put you back in control. I'm Ben Aarons, co-founder of Reorigin, where we teach you how to reclaim your health by retraining your brain, and let's get into it. In this example, we'll look at a common loop from post-traumatic stress disorder, and we'll use this example of experiencing something like a loud noise as a threat. Now, we know that inherently a loud noise is not in and of itself dangerous, but because the brain's first order of business is to keep you safe, what it wants to do is learn from past experiences to protect you in the future. And it does this by creating shortcuts in the brain. It creates associations. So for the average person, a loud noise might not necessarily mean danger, but let's take, for example, someone who experienced a trauma, who is, let's say, in a war, and for them, a loud noise might have been associated with an explosion that has potentially life-threatening consequences. So now, let's say they're out on the street and a car backfires down the road and they hear this loud noise. Because of the past experience, their brain will interpret that sound as a stressor, as a danger, and this leads to what we commonly know as fight, flight, or freeze, or the stress response. Now, when this happens, this leads to elevated heart rate, changes in blood pressure, heavy breathing, and when this reaches a state of so-called peak discomfort, that means all of these things being agitated in the body reach a level that's just sort of too uncomfortable to bear. Now, our natural tendency as creatures on this planet is to be biased against discomfort and try and move to avoid it. And so we do this by, say, in this case, maybe fleeing the scene, avoiding that area in the future, and avoiding anything that could make us feel dysregulated to this extent down the line. Now, here's where the brain gets a little bit sneaky. In the moment, it seems like that strategy works because when we avoid the discomfort, the brain rewards us with a little bit of dopamine saying, ah, yes, you did the right thing. So it leads to this momentary relief. But then what happens is because we didn't really solve the root of the problem, the feeling can return stronger than it was before. And when this happens, it creates this old confirming story of, yes, you see, that was a close call. A good thing I avoided the area. And this actually strengthens and reinforces that sense of danger in the brain that it's associated back to the loud noise. This is known as sensitization. And so the key of what we want to do when it comes to changing any of these sort of patterns is to reprocess the information, reprocess our response, and basically reclassify in the brain the stimulus, in this case, the loud noise, from the category of threatening, where it previously been placed, into a new category of safety or benign, meaning it doesn't have any negative impact on us. So one of the ways we can do this is just by taking a moment and getting into our rational minds, right? We realize that a loud noise in and of itself is not necessarily dangerous. And furthermore, any discomfort that we might experience as a result of the dysregulation, elevated heart rate, hormonal fluctuations, agitation, is not inherently dangerous. So if you want a nice little short one to remember this, just remember discomfort does not equal danger. Of course, knowing isn't enough. We have to actually experience and do something to help recondition these patterns. But knowing is a good first step because when we step into this new level of awareness, now we insert a space between the stimulus and response, and we're free to choose a new response. Now we're free to stick with the discomfort just a little bit longer than we otherwise might have. And when we do this, we start to send a powerful signal back to the brain, counteracting that signal of confirmation, saying, hey, actually, you know what? It's okay. I don't need to run away from this scene. I can actually be here, be safe, and be okay with this new experience. So let's see what this would look like. When we start to reprocess that the sound is just information, then again, it enables us to stay with it. We're kind of willing to accept and be with the discomfort. Dr. Norman Doidge wisely said, it's not about trying to change the feelings or the symptoms right away. It's about being comfortable in their presence. And eventually this leads to the dissipation of all of those feelings. So now we might experience a normalizing of the heart rate, normalizing of the breath. We realize that we can actually be calm in the face of discomfort. We don't even reach that state of peak discomfort. Instead, we stay in trust and perseverance, stick with it just a little bit longer than we might feel comfortable. And through what's called incremental training, this is the step of gradually increasing that time or space that we stay in that place. And we can use techniques like deep breathing, breathing. For members of Reorigin, we have some special techniques to reprocess the sensations as non-threatening that you can deploy. But essentially what we want to do is signal back to the subconscious mind that actually the discomfort itself is not dangerous. When we realize this and experience this, that momentary relief turns into a genuine relief and this new revolution that actually I'm okay. I can retrain my system and I don't need to default to those old behaviors. I'll still be fine. When you practice this repeatedly, and here's the key, it's very cool that we can experience this benefit right away, but I think what we would all agree is even more interesting is the long-term benefit, is changing our default state. And this happens by practicing this repeatedly. So every time we come up against that stimulus, we can think of it as a new opportunity, a new chance to practice our new response. And by getting in that space, reminding ourselves that discomfort does not equal danger, and then coming into a new strategy. So in that case, could be like take those deep breaths, deploying a simple technique and calming the nervous system. Now we start to actually desensitize ourselves to the very thing that was triggering us in the first place. We realize that in fact, it was just a loud noise. It doesn't bear the same information or impact on us. And now you are essentially getting back into the driver's seat. So if we're to really simplify, and we can see that once our brain has learned to protect us and has registered something as a threat, our natural instinct is to respond or react out of fear and avoidance. Remember, it's not something unique to you. This is something that everybody has. It is inherent into the hardwiring of every living creature on the planet to be biased against discomfort. And what we want to do is simply start to shift that by consciously intervening so that worry and resistance can turn into a willingness and acceptance to be with the discomfort a little bit longer than we might otherwise choose to. And by doing that, while at the same time keeping our body feeling calm and safe by taking some deep breaths, using a technique like the ones we use at Reorigin, that enables us to have courage and stay connected to the situation, which is real cause for celebration. Every time you break this loop, it is a win. And the science of small wins teaches us that when we celebrate that we've chosen a different route, then we can actually solidify it and strengthen it by celebrating it. So that feeds back that, in fact, what we once saw as a threat is now reclassified as this challenge or this opportunity for us to create new pathways in the brain. The great news is that this is entirely possible. There was a seminal paper that was written in 2011 called Rewiring the Stress Response, a new paradigm in healthcare. And they laid out these 4 truths of neuroplasticity. Truth number 1 is that if you're experiencing this sort of trauma loop where you feel like you're not in control of your own reactions, it's okay. It's not you, it's your wiring. Number 2 is that our wiring really has a profound impact on our nervous system and our brain and body state. We know that if our wiring defaults to this threat response, then we'll experience all of the signs and symptoms and emotions of being under attack or being under threat. Again, it's not you, it's just what our wiring does. Number 3 is that these states can become persistent. So if we don't interrupt them over time, our brain learns from the past to protect us in the future, and it will just keep these cycles going in an effort to A, protect you, and B, conserve energy. So it just reminds you, you know what, best to err on the side of caution, send you these sort of false alarm signals in this case, and prompt you to react out of fear and avoidance. And the 4th truth, and this is the empowering key, is that you can actually change your wiring through something known as self-directed neuroplasticity, aka brain retraining. And if we're to kind of distill it down, what it looks like is basically boils down into 3 steps. The first one is conscious awareness and compassion for yourself. Know that if you're experiencing this, it's not you, it's your brain, it's your wiring, it's natural, it's normal, and it's okay. Number 2, you can shift it by changing your response. And we do that by number 1, understanding that discomfort does not equal danger. And number 2, through willingness and acceptance, we sort of hang out with the uncomfortable feeling just a little bit longer than we might normally do so. And by doing that, we start to send a powerful signal back to the subconscious brain, in this case, the limbic system, which is responsible for emitting those emotional and hormonal responses. And this starts to reclassify the old stimulus, what was once threatening, to something that's now benign. And the third thing I would say is don't try and do this alone. Community is very powerful for this. Having support, having guidance, and having a community that's doing this together can be really powerful. And for that reason, we started the Reorigin community and content program where you can join online. You can learn our 4-step protocol to overcoming these sort of trauma responses or trauma loops and learning how to self-regulate. If this is something that you're interested in, just feel free to leave comments below. I'm always checking these comments and looking forward to following up. You can also visit us on the web at re-origin.com, and I look forward to hearing from you.